Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the drama, the decisions, and the politics that go with being the head of marketing at any company in what is one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here today with my guest, Phil Buckaloo. Today's topic, a marketer turned technology exec talks about big data, mainframes, and AI. Now, Phil started his career at Procter & Gamble in brand management, and then went on to James River, where we worked together on paper towels and bath tissue. You would refer to that as toilet paper. We called it bath tissue. And then he went on to IBM after Harvard Business School. He was there nearly 23 years as a general manager of the cloud business, the mobile business, and the software business. And now, for the last 2+ years, he's been president of the Infrastructure Modernization Group at Rocket, one of the longest business cards probably ever. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. Good to see you again.
Yes. So first question, give us an overview of the B2B technology landscape today you're right in the catbird seats on this. How is the industry doing? How is it recovering from the great tech revaluation of 2022? What are you seeing on trends?
Well, overall, it's the industry overall seems to be doing quite well. I mean, we're at all-time highs on the NASDAQ and the S&P as we're recording this. Gartner would tell you that IT spending is going to be about $5 trillion in 2024, up around 8%. So overall, that's a pretty good trend going on in the background. At Rocket Software, where I work, we spend most of our time talking to business to business and to enterprise clients. We're selling them software to kind of keep their environments up and running. And so I get a lot of perspective on the things that are important to them. And obviously, everything that's dominating the hype cycle is generative AI, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Yep. But there's honestly a lot of other stuff that's going on right now, too, that's really hot.
Tell us about that.
Cyber's hot because, there's tons of ransomware and breaches. I was actually out at the MGM Grand when they got hacked, and seeing slot machines down on the strip is something that I never thought I would see. But with that, and then honestly, the backlash that came from all the regulators, that's been one of the hottest areas that there is in the market right now. So
is cyber getting better or is it getting worse? Because I know there's a million companies rushing into cyber. And it's a great, it is red hot. We had a guest on B2B saying it's all AI and cyber. But is the cyber getting better, or is it just keeping up with the people's ability to breach everything?
It's actually a race. It's a race on both sides. And so you've got the bad guys, and they're using tools like AI, and so are the good guys as well. We focus on a lot of the core, the enterprise, the crown jewels, the stuff in the mainframe. And it's really important for companies to kind of up their game there, because that's really where the most important assets they've got, their data, is stored. In general, I think there's been a fair amount of progress in the industry, but there's still a lot of scrutiny because there's still a lot of risk. And honestly, our clients, they still have to keep spending here just to keep up.
And we're talking about digital transformation and infrastructure modernization and all this other stuff. Talk to us about that, and then write marketing into the story a little bit.
Well, so digital transformation, that's been kind of the buzzwords ever since I was doing strategy consulting back at IBM.
Yeah, where the connected home was a promise for, I think, over 100 years. So yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, the reality is that digital transformation is still a huge thing, and you've got to have a great digital presence or else you're irrelevant. The thought of my kids trying to pick up the phone and actually talk to a human, that just scares the heck out of them. So I think everybody's still obviously got to have a digital presence. And that means you really got to connect a lot of your architecture. You got to connect a lot of your systems, your back ends to your front ends. And that puts a lot of complexity on the IT folks of the world today. And obviously requires folks to be working with a lot of partners. You combine that with what's happening, and a lot of those systems are obviously happening on the cloud. Still tons of hype around the cloud. And there was kind of a little too much there as well. I mean, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a backlash where a lot of companies that kind of made the move to the cloud on the promises of, super cost savings and all of their complexity going away.
I mean, it was almost all cost savings at speed, right? I mean, that was the whole cloud thing, right?
Yeah, that's really a lot of the benefit. And there's the speed obviously has to do with flexibility as well. You can be more agile if you're able to spin servers up and down kind of as needed. And so there's obviously been a lot of interest there, but all of the savings in the ROI cases, a lot of those kind of plateaued a bit, especially when it comes to things like the mainframe and trying to move those workloads, because it's really, really hard, and you really have to pay, really close attention.
Why is it so hard? Why is it so easy to move so much stuff, and then when you get to the mainframe, so hard?
Well, a lot of the mainframe is based around, code and application code that was written 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it's written in different languages, and there's tons of interconnectivity. The people that built those applications, some of them are no longer alive. Some of them are certainly no longer with the companies that they work for. And then you get into a situation where all of those applications are, they're hard to maintain. They're connected with everything. Usually mainframes are used by regulated industries. So,
insurance, healthcare, everything. Yeah.
Insurance companies, that story.
Banks.
All of those different, folks. And so because they're regulated, there's decades of regulation that wraps around the applications as well. So you can't it's not something that you can just easily move. You've got to prove to the regulators exactly what's going on from this step to that step. And there's, that just leads a lot of complexity. And so, we're focused on modernization without disruption. And so
wait, so I have this cloud thing. I have the mainframe problem. I have infrastructure and the continuing digital revolution. I pour AI into this, and how do I feel about all of this? Is it just crazy, or how do I keep up with this and then write the marketer into the story?
Well, I think this is where, the marketers need a lot of speed. They need the dev teams and the CIOs in the world to be more agile. That's probably the biggest ask from the marketing side of the business. And to be able to accomplish that, the CIO teams and their partners that are running these environments, they have to modernize. They have to be able to move. There's different ways to build code. There used to be these waterfall ways where everything would happen all at once, and you do this long test process. You've got to be a lot more agile today than you were before. You can't just have these walled back-end environments that the mainframes are in. You have to share data and be able to replicate and sync data, but to keep it consistent, and you still need the governance and everything that goes with it. If you have a number of those different elements so that you're able to move more quickly, you're able to share data, then the businesses can be more agile. The banks can compete with the fintechs and similar types of environments. And it's like that's really what's needed to be successful. And that's why it's complicated, but why there's a big payout if you can pull it off.
Now, are there very many companies that haven't gone to agile yet?
In the mainframe space, there's a lot of waterfall development, because you remember, it's like a lot of these things just don't get touched very often. The mainframe is a very different world in terms of the architecture, and that's what leads to its benefits. It's the most reliable, available, secure platform you've got. But if you don't modernize it, then it's not able to evolve as quickly as other environments.
Hey, Phil, give me some functions that a marketer might care a lot about that are trapped in the mainframe waterfall process that will then run into the agile process when you're trying to get them done.
Mainframes are all about transactions. That's where the core strength is. In fact, when we talk to clients, we advise them to continue to keep their transactions on the mainframe. But for other things, that are more like, we used to call them systems of engagement, and like some of the, obviously a lot of the marketing apps, those will be running, on the cloud or in other environments. They're very burstable. Campaign comes out, then you can scale up a ton of servers. Being able to wire that into the mainframe so that you can still get the transactional integrity that the regulators are looking for, while also having all of those more modern systems that are using a lot of like near real-time analytics and the like to make better decisions. That's really where we see most clients evolving to, like that hybrid architecture that kind of takes the best of both worlds, the best of the mainframe and the transactional integrity, plus the scalability and the burstability and all the other stuff you can get on the cloud.
It sounds like two super cultures trying to meet, and it doesn't sound easy, actually.
They don't always talk to each other, and they don't always get along that well. And that can be one of the challenges. And that's something that I think everybody in this industry is focused on, is trying to build those bridges, find better ways to have these tools integrate so that you can get the outcomes and the ROI that you need.
So write AI into this story for me. And if you can give me any like live examples where AI is sitting on top of a bunch of mainframe transactions, that's super helpful.
There's a lot of different models. I think, first of all, the growth in Gen AI is really driving a lot of the boardroom dialogue. It's beginning to move into more usable applications, and I can give some examples there. But what it leads to is companies, enterprise clients, one of their biggest values is in having data. It's their data. And that's really how they're differentiating themselves. But if all that data is locked up in transactional systems that you can't get access to, or you can't get access to frequently, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. So a lot of our work with clients is being able to take the data that they need, not all of it, not the PII data or other things that you don't want to get out into the wild, but sync that up with the clouds, so that they can be mashed in with other data coming off mobile phones or other Internet of Things devices to have applications that pull in the latest information from all of those areas, but that can actually do something, that can actually effectuate a transaction. And so that's where you really need all of those pieces to be married together.
Hey, Phil, and when we say transaction, we're obviously talking anything that's money, or a record like a claims record in insurance, or a bank record or anything. Am I getting transaction right? But just so our listeners, make sure we all understand transactions.
Yeah. So the mainframes are basically, they would keep the planes in the air and the trains running and the financial transactions of the world flowing, because you can't swipe a credit card. Like more than 90% of the credit card transactions go over the mainframe. You buy an airplane seat, that's going back to the mainframe. You change something related to your policies. Those are all things that happen on those systems of record. And that's where these huge amounts of data, both structured data and unstructured data, get created and stored. But you want to be able to leverage that data as you're doing model training and you're using large language models on clouds and so forth, to be able to build inferencing and better solutions that can be more realistic. A lot of the AI today, there's a lot of examples of where clients are using chatbots, and chatbots are a good front end to be able to help people to make transactions, so that the Zoomer doesn't have to pick up the phone and call somebody.
Yes,
and so that's an example of where you're able to kind of tie those things together. But to pull that off, you need to pull all of your data into the environment to be able to train those models appropriately.
Super. Thank you for that. Let's flip this over a little bit. Like, you started out in marketing at, a company that I started out as well, P&G. Then you flipped over into technology. And you've been in the center of almost all these explosions. What's it like in there? Like, what's that transition like? And if anybody wanted to make that kind of transition, what advice would you give them?
Well, it can sometimes be difficult for marketing people to move or to move into IT. And it's something that I really, really wanted to do, partly because I really liked the product side. I've always kind of been a product guy. And so you remember when we were working on paper towels, it took at the time $300 million to build a paper machine, and 10 years to get it built.
Yeah.
just to just to be able to get something to do something different with the product side.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what drew me to IT and back into technology. I'd studied a little bit in school, but when I got to IBM, my first job there was a marketing job, and so I was more on the execution side, and that was interesting. But the problem was I wasn't even really capable of talking to clients yet because there's so much jargon, there's so much technology background. So I honestly spent the first couple of years reading analyst reports, talking to anybody that would talk to me so that I could get deep enough to talk to clients. And then I could move into a product management role. And then I, moved on from there. But it's getting enough of a semblance of understanding of the market. And I was moving from business to consumer to business, which is also a pretty big shift. But being able to really kind of go a level deeper on the technology, but also bring what marketing really brings to the table, a lot better understanding of a lot of the data, the consumer data, the buyer data. That's something that a lot of technologists don't really pay as much attention to.
And tell me about that. So you went from, straight consumer goods into, tech, and then to B2B. The B2B shift, tell us what was the keys to making that work?
I mean, it's totally different, candidly. And that's something that it really took a long time to get. I remember walking around with reams of IRI scanner data that were printed out on paper where I could know so much more about what was happening with my product and happening in the environment, and to reach people. At the time, it was a FSI, a coupon in the Sunday paper.
And IRI, just so all our listeners know, IRI was really share data from a centralized warehouse where everyone could tell who was selling what, so you could get your market share in consumer goods.
Right. Yeah. So that part, and the business to business side is so much smaller. It's just a smaller university of buyers. There's buying committees these days. There's so many more people that are involved in a decision to purchase something. And so really, the funnels are very different, and needing to map that out to better understand the different constituencies. In the business to business environment, everybody's buying on a spreadsheet much more than, they are by the appeal of packaging on the front, on the end dial displays and the like. And so it was a very different model. It took a while for me to really better understand it, but then understanding the aspects of marketing that are the same, which are better understanding how big is the market, what's the willingness to pay, what's the value that you bring. There's a lot of similarities in there in that way that I thought were really useful.
So most companies are buying off a spreadsheet, which is they're going to list all the costs, all the benefits, how they're going to use it. How are they doing that for AI, though, particularly generative AI, where the spreadsheet is a lot probably harder to predict?
It's a lot. I mean, it's much harder these days. And in fact, that's why there's a lot more tire kicking right now than or people that are buying because the boards are putting pressure on them to give something a try. And there's a lot of snake oil being sold out there too. And so I think what's important right now, if you're shopping for AI, is to really, do your homework, look for those references. And
so how do you do that? We've just said that digital revolution is still ongoing. The infrastructure is, transitioning, and now I have AI. How do I kick the tires here, particularly if I'm in the marketing side of this? I assume you have to have a great relationship with your IT department, but what advice would you give our listeners as to how to kick the tires and see what's snake oil and what's not?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, there's not going to be that many companies that need to train their own models, that need to do all of the yeoman's work to train these large language models, or even some of the fine tuning in their space. Most companies are I believe most AI will be purchased as a part of something else, as a part of other tools. The Adobe guys have got Firefly, you've got Copilot with all the Microsoft tools, and there's a lot of other examples. We have a documentation provider that adds a ChatGPT front end, and so being able to look at the vendors you have and first of all, trying their offerings without needing to do a great big train your own models type project, that's going to be, I think, the first place to shop, because that'll give you a much lower risk way to get to AI and to see some of the benefits than trying to do, a big from the ground up type play. There will be some companies that need to do the from the ground up play, but then you're going to have to do, I would recommend you work with a lot of partners in order to try to pull that off.
And that ground up, that's where you're going to train your own AI model. So you have a proprietary model based on your stuff, right?
Exactly. So,
and who's some companies that should be considering that? Because then all other companies should be using vendors. So
yeah, and I think if you have a proprietary set of data and you're going to mine that data, and you believe that there's a couple of different models. There's ways to be able to access that data without even training your own models. There's something called retrieval augmented generation RAG models. There's various different approaches and tools that you can use, but if you really are trying to create a competitive advantage in a completely new area, and you have a massive amount of data that's needed to train those models, that might be an area where you could get a competitive advantage. But if you don't, then it's a waste of time.
And what industries might want to train their own models?
Well, I think obviously I'm most closely related into the IT space. And so if somebody's generated a ton of code in a language that's not very common, or they have a lot of that, then that might be something that they could use to train some development type of models. I think that there are other spaces as well where we have clients that have a lot of unstructured data, and sometimes unstructured data. Think about that as like pictures of documents and contracts and things that are old. Most of that data can still be mined without needing to create your own large language or foundation models. And there are companies that are even learning to train data on smaller subsets of data. So there's some interesting developments there. It's moving really fast, but I think in general, most companies will not need to do that. They'll be able to take advantage of some of these models that have been trained by the big hyperscalers or others in the space whose names you all know from, and be able to run the models or fine tune them or use a RAG approach. There's a number of different approaches. And that's where I think getting some knowledgeable consultants or software vendors or others can pay dividends.
Well, let's talk about how you pick the right vendor or consultant. What questions should you be asking? And I guess to kick the tires, show me what you've done. But this is, if you're not really familiar with it, give our listeners some tips they should do.
So the first thing I'd say is consider the motivations of whoever you're talking to. If you're talking to a company that's a system integrator, their business model is to often bill out a lot of people to be on big projects. So watch long-term open-ended contracts there. There's other companies that have really broad approaches, and that's usually a pretty good place to go, because you're less likely to go to like a small company that's got like an ISV.
Yeah.
If you're an ISV and you've just got one product or one type of AI that you're delivering, then whatever problem the customer has, your solution is going to be the perfect fit. It's the hammer nail problem. That's why we've invested in a number of different options to help clients that are like looking at modernizing their mainframe. We invested in order to be able to have a number of different ways to do that. I think some of the big guys like Microsoft and IBM that are not just oriented to that one approach, they can be good places to go to be able to get advice from too, because they have a much broader client list and are much more likely to have clients that have brought them problems that they've helped solve in a number of different ways. The other piece of advice I'd give you is if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. In our space, there's like a lot of applications that are written in this really old language called COBOL. And there's a lot of,
sadly, I remember COBOL.
Siren sound of you can just convert it to Java and everything will work right. That's usually not been my experience with some of these things. And then, the 101 thing is check the references. Make sure that you're, talking to people that have used the projects, understand how they might be similar or different than your stack. Make sure that it's not going to require you a massive integration project to try to integrate with your whole tech stack. And those are the kinds of things that are going to increase your chances for success.
So let's write the marketer specifically into this story. Say you're sitting there as a CMO and you're getting a vote, or you're actually leading who you're going to select for AI because the company has decided you're going to be point in this implementation, particularly on the marketing side or the customer side. Give us some tips for the marketers.
Well, I think what you really want to do is make sure, some of this is probably pretty elementary, but make sure it's really going to deliver a real ROI for you. Make sure it's consistent with your strategy. It's some kind of other problem that you're trying to solve as well. But then I would look for the companies that can give you a payback in a short amount of time, because this is a very fast moving space. Trying to bite off the big, long-term, massive investment program, that's typically not going to be worth it. And the space is moving so fast. You need someone that can come in and deliver you value in weeks and months, not years. And so finding a couple of spaces like that, and there's a lot of off-the-shelf things that folks can buy and can try. And those are ones that, we've gotten some, really good value from, like, for example, we have a lot of documentation, and just exposing that documentation through a chat GPT like questionnaire interface, that provides a lot of value, and people love that. And then you get the first win established, and then you can do more from there. I'm not in the marketing space like you guys are, like everyone listening here is, so I'm not as close to all of the content generation, but our CMOs team is spending a lot of time on those types of platforms that can really simplify the job of content creation. And I know there's huge opportunities there.
But I hear in there two principles. One is really don't sign a long-term contract because the business is going way too fast. And then two, don't pick a project that has a really long runway to play here. Is that fair?
I think that's mostly right. Obviously, if you're with one of the big strategics that is going to be investing for the future, you have some more security there. I think of like IBM's and Microsoft's and the like. You're going to have, that they're going to be investing. They're going to be investing for the long term. And so there's probably a little bit more length of time, project duration that I go for in that space. But as far as like doing anything custom yourselves, the amount of change that's happened since large language models came out just a little more than a year ago to now is massive. And so guard against that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, don't trap yourself. So, hey, now you've been on both sides of the aisle, if you were, tech and marketing. And having lived in tech land for a while personally and worked in some tech, they don't have the best reputation always for accepting and, nurturing marketers. Give marketers some advice for if they join a tech company or they want a career in marketing tech, how should they think about it? And what are the key interview questions they should be asking?
So a couple things. So I think it's important to recognize that the business you're going into is, and this is like I said, this is what I spent a good amount of time is trying to learn more about the business. And it's harder because all the jargon and everything else that's used in the tech industry, and that could be common in other places, but I certainly saw it here. I think it's important for the marketing team to bring data. That's always been valuable for the best marketing people that I've worked with on the consumer side and in the business to business side. is bringing data and leading with the facts. And that also means being transparent around what's working and what's not working. And so the marketers that do that are the ones that I gravitate to in my current role. And those are the kinds of people that I really want to work with. I think there has to be an understanding that, marketers in understanding the customer, that's really where you start. And that was true in the consumer side. It's certainly true on the business to business side. But understanding the customer and understanding the funnel are aspects that that's value that the marketers can really uniquely bring. Now, understanding the customer can be tricky because sometimes even talking to the customer in a tech business is hard, and you might need to do that in conjunction with some technical experts. And so anybody that's going into this career, I always used to run these, kind of trades when I got into management early on in the tech side. I would offer to help the technical people that worked for me and that worked with me in something that they were trying to accomplish, getting some new project or driving some project, in trade for them spending time teaching me about the technology,
how it actually works,
and the skills, and how to talk about it, to clients myself. And that was really invaluable. And you can do that in a lot of different ways, but that's been something that's really valuable.
And there's a lot when you get into tech too. I think in consumer goods, yes, the brand always matters. I'm not sure it matters as much in all the B2B stuff versus the product or the relationship with the customer. Could you talk about that a little bit?
The channels are so totally different that we use. I mean, and frankly, there's a trade show called Share in the Mainframe that's been going on for more than 50 years. And people still go there to conduct business and to do things. It's almost like an anachronism. It's kind of a dated way of doing things when you think about.
I go to an in-person meeting to talk about my technology that links you instantly across the world.
Exactly. So there's so much about that that's still important. The face-to-face meetings, the dinners. I mean, those things you're building. The relationship is so much more important, because it's not just 30 seconds at the end of the aisle trying to look at who's got the prettiest package and the lowest price. So there's so much more to that. There's still the elements of trying to reach, and that's really the big difference, I think, is I don't know, it's the only difference, but it's so much harder to reach the target. And the target is so complex because there's so many different constituents that have an influence over a decision. And you have to know what is the buying process, who's the person that signs the check, but often that's the least important person. It's some influence in our space. It's some influencer that is the only one that knows how a mainframe app is working. And you need to have their approval before, you're going to sell them anything. So understanding the complexity of the buying process is something that I find it's totally different, and you won't be successful if you don't know that.
So I'm a marketer. I'm interviewing at a tech company. Give me tips to make sure it's a good fit for me.
Well, I think you want to understand kind of, what it is that you want about that job. Why is it that you want to go into that business? Is it something that the company does? I think showing your enthusiasm for the work they do, I think that's a good piece. Showing your willingness to learn some of the technology, showing a depth of understanding around, who their competitors are. Do your homework, try to understand, what's happening in the marketplace, in the environment, because the roles can be very different from, it certainly was for me in the case of toilet paper versus enterprise software. They couldn't be more different.
Yes, trained on the cutting edge of toilet paper.
Exactly. We used to call it commercial paper, by the way. That's what we tried.
There we go. Hey, we're kind of running out of time. We'd probably love to have you back on the show to talk more about this, but I would love to kind of talk a little bit about the MTECH Stack and what you see there, best and worst practices, and also get a commitment for you to come back on the show. So It's
Happy
a
to come
two-part
back
question.
anytime you think I can help.
All right, very good.
In terms of the MarTech stack, I don't work with this directly every day, so I'm not as close as as Barb and our CMO team, who are really embraced these tools in a really material way. But seeing the interaction between obviously the CRM tools, marketing tracking tools, understanding how they all fit together. I think we use 6sense, we use Marketo. There's a number of different ones that are a part of our stack, understanding our clients using ZoomInfo and D&B and others. Those are all important. As a business unit leader, I'm usually interacting with the teams that are using those to get a better read on our customers. And I think where I've seen the thing that's most different from the world we were in before is how account-based marketing has really started to take hold, and how you can use the tools and understand how people are interacting with your website and be able to get so deep into understanding who is the person that is most interested and be able to market to them directly. Those, and having a view of those tools, but it's not just having those tools running disconnected, it's having enough integration so that you can get an ROI on the different investments. That's what I've seen as like just a general business person that is most valuable. The days of like, and sometimes it's not always simple. So it was always hard to quantify a brand awareness piece. And I think it still is in many regards. But, being on that day one list in an enterprise software business is really important. And so that really goes right to the awareness side. And then we have to look at other metrics that are maybe a little further down in the funnel. A lot of our leads are still sourced. Honestly, they're sales sourced leads. Being able to influence or progress those leads is important. And that's where I need all of these other, field and other account-based tactics, either account-based marketing, reaching those clients digitally, but also being able to reach them through other, techniques and events we might run in the field. We still run a ton of events. And I find that those are great for progression in moving our deals along and understanding objections and getting things across the line. So it's a combination of all of that, but they really do need to be integrated together.
Thank you for that. So last question, because we're at time. Funniest story or piece of practical advice we haven't talked about yet for all our listeners? You could take one or both parts of that, but you have to take at least one.
All right. Well, when I was a very junior, I think I was probably a junior brand manager at a company I worked for a long time ago. We were moving from an animated campaign to a real person campaign. We thought we needed to be able to relate to our population better. And so we wanted to change things up. We thought it would give us a big brand pop. So we did a bunch of work and found a perfect representative for our animated icon. And we cast this guy after a lot of effort. He was a real masculine guy, and he looked great, and he tested super well in the focus groups. And so we thought he was going to be the perfect guy. Well, this old, somewhat curmudgeon on the team pressed me at the last minute to run a background check. And as a junior brand manager, I thought it was just a delay tactic. And in the end, the person that was about to be the face of our brand had a criminal record for stealing a car, and I think had done some work in the adult film industry. And so I guess that kind of gets to both. So, it was something that I learned some lessons from, to always do your due diligence, but also to always listen to everybody that has an opinion. You can discard those opinions, but usually if somebody's giving you advice, they're giving you advice for a reason.
I think a great way to end the show. Thank you, Phil. And thanks to everyone for listening to CMO Confidential. If you're enjoying the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And look for all of our shows on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the I Hear Everything Network. These shows include Marketing, the Battle Between Believers and Non-Believers, Part 1, 2, and 3. Is the CMO position the hardest job in business? And is AI an extinction event for agencies? Hey, all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off for CMO Confidential.